Coming up next, Jason Vitug, not only a great friend of OG and mine, but also a wellness advocate and best-selling author of 2 books. He was on and went around the country for his first book, You Only Live Once. The reason I wanted to talk to him is that as we've emerged from this time when we weren't together to a time when a lot of things are changing, we've had a lot of people on lately talking about happiness. And I think Jason does a great job of wrapping money, something he's been deeply involved in his entire career in banking and with credit unions, and now with Frugal, his brand, and his 2 books, and this idea of happiness. And where is that middle ground? Jason's going to attack that for us today. I'm super happy he's back in the basement. It's been too long. Jason Vitug is here. How are you, man?
I am doing great, Joe. It has been way too long to be here.
So I have to start off here. I remember you fast and furious on the last book, going 100 miles an hour. You breeze in, but not breeze. You're like a house on fire coming through Texarkana. You're in my picture taken with a turkey, which is like one of my favorite pictures of all time. We have a blast. I remembered you slept in like my kid's room and I accidentally had the heat on. So it was a way hotter night in Texarkana than it should have been. I'll apologize for that again. But then you just go off the map. You're gone. Like you're there and then you're completely gone. So imagine my surprise as I'm reading the foreword of your current book, and you got sued?
Yes, I did. It's been a wild journey, and that just has a lot to do with hiring the wrong people to do work for you, giving them the decisions to make and giving them the okay. And then all of a sudden finding a person standing in front of your house with a letter and going, what is this? Oh, okay, this is nice.
That is it's so wild. But the story even goes deeper than this, which is, you're going to all these different states. You're working with credit unions across the country. You're even stopping in beautiful Texarkana, which was awesome. But you're doing all this stuff and you were fried. I mean, you were just fried. You went to your doctor's office. You were having headaches and.
Yeah. I mean, I was having headaches. I was lethargic. I couldn't get out of bed. So here's the thing, right? Like I have all the energy to do a ton of things, but I just couldn't physically get out of bed. So I thought there was something wrong with me. And so I started going to my doctor, my GP, general practitioner, and we were doing a ton of tests and trying to figure out what was wrong, what was causing this tiredness. And of course, everything leads to the big C, right? Because I have this mission, this purpose, I have the desire, the motivation, but my body just physically could not do it. And that's when, after all the tests, he comes back and he says, I think you have adrenal fatigue. And that's really not a diagnosis, but to let you know that you've been probably running wild for a very long time and your body is in this high stress zone. And so that is the baseline in which it was operating from. And so therefore I was wearing my body thin and landed me like sick and unable to do the work that I wanted to do.
That's so wild. And then, but let's be clear here. I've known you for a long time, dude.
Yes. And
you did exactly what Jason's do. You're like, hey, that's great. This is a horrible diagnosis, but I'm going to keep going.
That's exactly it. It's that drive. I think I've said a couple of times, there's a curse to ambition. It's like, it just never makes you want to accept where we are in life and to appreciate the achievements. And so, yeah, I kept going until I really hit a wall and realized I need to take a step back. And taking a step back meant limiting my social media use, limiting my speaking gigs. I was still working behind the scenes, but as you've stated, I was invisible for the most part. And so when I re-entered this world, it's fascinating how much it's changed. And so I feel like this really elderly person coming into this world of going, what's TikTok?
I can't dance. I can do yoga poses now. We'll get into that.
Yes, I can. I've tried dancing in the platforms, and then I look at myself and I go, is this really me? or am I some just AI just dancing?
Like those cutout heads that they put on people and make them dance on different platforms. But it seems like you come by this honestly, because your mom was having a similar. It sounds like she was drained and she had been running herself ragged as well.
Yeah. So my mom was the breadwinner in the household, and so she was running herself thin. And so she's been having these different episodes in terms of medical issues, and she had high stress levels, high blood pressure. She worked in law, and eventually she ended up in the hospital, and we come to discover that she was suffering from much more than just high blood pressure, and she was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And so that was...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was all the symptoms were leading up to the Parkinson's diagnosis. And so that affected me heavily. And I remember sitting in the doctor's office and my mom looking at me going, is this what retirement means? Just spending all this time in the doctor's offices. And there was a period where part of me disappearing, I spent like 40 doctor visits with my mom, going in and out of doctors' offices and medical facilities and things like that, just trying to understand this disease and also understanding all the symptoms that go along with Parkinson's. And so my mom retired earlier than the traditional retirement age. And so this was all just a shock for me. So not only was I having my own medical issues, now I'm dealing with my mom's medical issues as well. And so that took a big toll, and also start reassessing some of my choices in life, and also affirming my philosophy about living well.
Well, and I want to get to that in a moment, but it was at this moment, guys, it was at this moment, I think that that you got sued. Like everything else is going horribly, and then you find out you're getting sued on top of it, and it was time for a reboot. So, you know, you wrote, and I felt like this was a little bit of a flex. You're like, so I'm at my Airbnb in Italy when I realized, I'm like, oh, nice. My Airbnb is I'm sipping on my latte, my beautiful Italian wine, when I realized this is all together. But you did have this big aha that, listen, all of this stuff, being sued, bad financial decisions by some people around you, the stuff in your personal life, like these aren't all disconnected, disparate things. These are all pieces of a whole.
That's absolutely right. And that was the thing, because I was looking at it in terms of, okay, this is business work. This is the financial piece. This is the personal family issues. And I was trying to solve each of those issues separately, and then not realizing that they are all connected. And so when you remove yourself, and I removed myself from the environment, and that was going to Positano, Italy, that little flex, that allowed me to look at my situation differently. I think that's important too, right? When in the healing process, in the assessment process, is remove yourself from the situation, and then our brain starts processing it differently. And that's what happened with me. And that's why that's a real life aha moment where I started making the connection and started going, okay, these are different pieces, but they are all connected. And how are they connected? And that was like that revelation that we are multidimensional, multifaceted, multi-layered. And I think we all know this, but I hadn't quite figured out what that meant. I talk a lot about work and I talk a lot about finance, but then there are other aspects that people know me about, mental and emotional. And now I'm having these physical issues as well. So they all started connecting. And that was that aha moment of wellness. Wellness is dimensional. There are different aspects of what makes us us. And when I finally understood it in that capacity, things started changing for me.
Is this why you took up yoga? Then because I feel like yoga is one of these yoga is kind of one of these interdimensional things, right? I mean, it's exercise, but it's stretching, but it's spiritual, but there's all these but it's.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's mind, body, soul, it's physical, it's mental, it's spiritual, and it's also social. You get to hang out with other people going through this experience, and you tend to do these in different places. So it has an environmental factor in it. So yeah, it actually hits all these dimensions. But I was actually a practicing yogi for like 12 years, and I just wanted to.
Really?
Yeah, people don't know that. Yeah, I practiced yoga for 12 years. And the reason why I got into yoga was I was so stressed at work when I was in my corporate job that my boss recommended I take yoga. Also, my doctor at the time recommended that I take yoga. And I remember my first yoga class, I was laying down, they were trying to tell me, okay, relax your shoulders on the floor. And the yoga instructor, Will, he was like, relax. I'm like, I am relaxed. He goes, no, you're trembling. And so that's kind of one of the things. It's like, I was so wound up. My body was so tight. I couldn't even lay on the floor and allow my body to just be supported by the ground. And that was another revelation. And so like, when you talk about, when I look at my life, I noticed that there was this treadmill I was on trying to climb up the corporate ladder. I got off of it, and then I got onto the entrepreneurial ladder, and it was the same thing. I was chasing the same thing with a different name, and it landed me in the same situation. I was burnt out, tired, exhausted. And so that's because I didn't understand how everything was connected.
It's funny, you talked about getting out of the situation, and you don't need to go to, all the way to Italy. But I love this idea that just getting out of that situation, Jason, getting your head out of that space, giving yourself the room to breathe and to think for a minute. Like, I feel like, I don't know, we kind of tell ourselves, hey, I will hand this over to the universe to fix once I get done completely it up. You know what I mean? Like, I just got to mess this up a little more before I take a break.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, you have to take a break. You have to remove yourself from the environment in which that's perpetuating the situations, that's perpetuating the stress, because so the environment, the situation can be physical. It could be your household, it can be the community. It can be the situation in which we're finding ourselves in, whether it's financial stress, work stress. We have to remove ourselves from that situation, that environment. And what I find is that getting away physically, taking my physical body somewhere else, forces our mind to kind of like figure out what's happening, right? It's sort of like in the base, like fight or flight, figure out this new location. And then eventually you start thinking about your situation that you left behind in a totally different way. And that has a lot to do with the different conversations you have, the different experiences, and all that relates to your mind processing your past experiences differently with the new data that it's receiving from being outside of your normal bubble.
I think, it's these big moves, these non-incremental moves, this kind of new thinking versus incremental thinking. And I feel like it's impossible to do this big thinking about life and what am I really doing without getting yourself out of this day to day. Otherwise, I'm always thinking about the 3% raise, or can I save $30 more a month? Maybe I need to cancel one subscription. Don't get me wrong. These things are all great money moves, but they're just tiny versus where the hell am I headed and getting out of there. Is that same reason, by the way, you just also did a trip, because I know you just want to be like me, I'm sure, is the whole thing. So you went to Egypt and Jordan. I just went to Egypt and Jordan. Same thing there. Just get out of it before this big tour.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And it's funny because I think I saw your post while you were in Egypt, and that inspired me. And so I see friends traveling the world, and I'm sitting alone in my house staring at my computer. I'm going, what am I doing with my life? That's changed,
toxic. You should not do that.
I know you should not do that. It is so bad, and that's kind of one of the key things too. It's sort of like our circle of friends does influence us, and also in a non direct way in terms of social media, right? You're just posting because you're enjoying your time, and then eventually you're influencing guys like me staring at your profile picture of this amazing trip. But I also understand too that you enjoyed your time there, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. So I knew that I was going to go on this tour to promote the book. But what I wanted to do was to kind of get away from just kind of the day to day and reassess.
Yeah.
And so I've always wanted to go to Greece. I've always wanted to go to Egypt and Jordan to see Petra. But for some reason, Joe, I just wouldn't go. I've been to so many other parts of the world, and you know my travel stories. I've been to Asia,
Sure.
South America. Everywhere. But for some reason, the places that I've wanted to go as a kid, to go see the Acropolis, to go touch the pyramids, were two things I kept holding off to. I was like, okay, I'll do that later. I'll find the perfect time, because that is a childhood dream. And eventually I go, the perfect time is now. This is the perfect time, and everything else will land where it lands. I'm going to take, I think it was like 35, 40 days. Went out there, Greece, Turkey, Italy. See, that's another vacation spot I need to go back to. It's in my mind. Yeah. But Egypt and Jordan and Oman, I mean, it was such an amazing experience. And I go back to the conversations I was having with the other travelers I was meeting along the way, the locals, the guides, and just having different experiences when it comes to the food and just all of that culminated to going, I am in the right place where I need to be. And so I'm rested, I'm excited, and I'm ready to get people to start connecting everything.
But it also just, I don't know, it makes me see so much clearly my day-to-day when I'm in somebody else's day-to-day a little bit. When I was talking to people from Egypt in Cairo, it just gave me, more of a I don't know. For people who haven't traveled internationally, you need to. I just think it gives you such a different life view.
I agree with you. And it's so funny because I think they say if you can drive in cities like New York, you can drive anywhere. No, try driving in Israel or try driving in Cairo, Egypt. Yes. I mean, I think if you...
Saigon. Yeah. I remember being on the back of a Vespa in Saigon and I was sure I was going to die.
Yeah, it is something else. And then your mind is processing that and going, okay, traffic in New York isn't that bad. Traffic in different parts of the US is not that bad compared to the 3-lane highway that has turned to 6 lanes and everything is zooming by. And so that does give you a different perspective, and it gives you an appreciation for what we have. And I think that's why I encourage people to get out of their day-to-day, to go out and travel. And when people go and they'll say, oh, it's too expensive to travel overseas, I get that. But there are places in the US that are amazing, that can get you out of the day-to-day in kind of like the bustling New York City metro area. You can go down to other parts of the country. You can explore national parks. And what happens, and this is a fact and also kind of sad, the vast majority of people you're going to meet at the U.S. national parks are probably foreigners than Americans, and they're appreciating the national park system that we have. And so I always encourage other people, it's here in our country, and you don't have to fly across the pond to get to.
It frustrates me every time I go to national parks, how few Americans are there, and don't get me wrong, I love the fact that it's multinational. That's pretty cool.
Yes.
But I'm like, where are the locals? What are we doing? I wanted to start there because this is the philosophy really behind the book, but I really want to dive into some themes in the book. You say in chapter 2, I think, money isn't everything. Mm-hmm. Where are you going with that? It's a money book, Jason. Money's not everything. What do you mean?
Yeah, I wanted people to understand that money isn't everything, but it impacts most things. So this is my philosophy, that I'm not saying don't set financial goals, don't manage your money well, income is not important. I mean, we know that we live in a society built around money. And for me to say money isn't important is kind of ignoring the fact. And so I want people to understand that money isn't everything, but it does impact most things. And I want you to understand what those things are. And that's what's vital, because then we can start doing the work or focusing on different aspects of our financial life that can actually impact the things that are that's the most important things in our lives. And so, yes, money isn't everything, but it impacts most things. And
this is also 12 years of interviewing people, Jason. The first financial book I've ever read that has poetry in it.
Yes, it does.
Fantastic. Where'd the idea come for the poetry?
You know, I wanted to push my boundaries in terms of writing. And I said, what brings joy into my life? And it was exploring this different medium. And so before the quarantine, before the pandemic, I had this experience of like just feeling overwhelmed again with my mother's diagnosis and things like that. And one morning I woke up and I just started rhyming, and just words just started flowing in a very rhythmic, poetic way. I started writing it down, and I wanted to share it out, but I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed to share this type of writing. And so I remember I held on to it for a year. And then I went during the pandemic and the quarantine, I went to yoga teacher training online. So this was the first time that the big Yoga Alliance certification body allowed teacher training for yogis online. And I said, okay, I think this is my time to do this. And they went and said one day, do something that makes you uncomfortable and share it to this cohort. And I go, the most uncomfortable thing for me right now isn't getting into these yoga poses. It's to sharing this poetry that I wrote. And so I said it. I was so nervous. I was stumbling. And you know, I speak for a living, but I was stumbling. I was nervous. But my team, my yoga cohort, just knew how connected I was to this. And I knew when I wrote this book that I wanted to include that. And I wanted to include other poetry or what I consider my poetic voice in this book, because I want people to understand too, when we finally achieve a level of financial security, independence, or reaching financial milestones, we should be free to explore. We should be free to express ourselves the way we want to. And this was another medium for me to do that.
Well, and I feel like this, two things. Number one, putting yourself out there, right, is a big thing. And I'm imagining that you know, it was nerve-wracking, but you must have felt awesome after you did it.
I did. I felt amazing. Yeah, it was one of those things, I think, pushing the limits, that the self-imposed limits on our mind. I think that is part of the growth mindset. So for me, writing the poetry was one thing, like publicly sharing it was another. And this is just another way for me to share it out into the world and say, okay, money doesn't have to be dry and boring. It could be fun. It could be experimental. It could be, wow, this guy wrote a poem about money and he's bearing it all out into the world. So I want people to rethink their relationship. And I thought this was a really fun way to do so. And for me, it was also a way to push that boundary. And did it push that boundary?
Well, and then the second piece of that too is this idea of celebrating, right? The idea of celebrating your poetry, celebrating new things, sharing it with people, having these people around you that are pushing you. You know, I mean, this has been a theme not just of our conversation, but of the theme in the book. One of your last chapters in the book, you go over these different happies, happy mind, happy work, happy heart, happy body. But one of those is happy social.
Yes.
Tell me about the difference in where happy social fits in with this whole multi-generational approach to money.
Yeah. So the most important thing I want people to understand too, it's like we kind of gloss it over. So there are 8 dimensions of wellness. That's your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, social, occupational, environmental, and financial. And I specifically talk about how money weaves itself into these 8 wellness dimensions that make you you. And one aspect I think that gets overlooked is the social wellness dimension, which I call happy social. That is the area where you have relationships with your partner, your friends, your family, your coworkers. They can be positive relationships or negative. They can be assets or liabilities. And so I share a story of someone who was working hard to achieve financial independence pre-pandemic. And he used to gloat online how he was saving $20 to reach his goal faster by saying no to his friends. It was a point of pride to say no to his friends when they would ask him to go out to dinner, out to drinks. And what happened during the quarantine? Well, no one was asking him to go out. And then he realized how alone he felt. He realized that even though he was not attending the social gathering with his friends, he was still having a type of social relationship. And so he had an epiphany on how valuable social relationships were to his well-being. And he told me he would have spent 10 times the $20 just to be surrounded with friends and having conversations and creating memories. And I think I want people to understand that there are certain sacrifices that we make to achieve financial goals. One of them shouldn't be a complete abandonment of our social health. Again, partners, friends, family, coworkers, and also an understanding that there is a way for us to kind of relieve ourselves from toxic relationships, whether they're toxic partners or toxic friends or coworkers, that there are ways, because that does affect our well-being and eventually will affect our money. And so for me, it's challenging people on how they're looking at their finances through these wellness dimensions. And so glad you brought up that social health aspect.
Well, it sounds like, though, let me ask you this. I mean, our stackers that are listening to this, Jason, if they're introverts, they're freaking out right now. They're like, well, I gotta go be more social. But I think even for introverts, there's this piece of it that we still have to have.
Yeah, there is. And part of that too, it doesn't mean you go out in public and try to meet as many new people or you're pushing the limit. That is actually really important. That's part of mental health, is pushing yourself in these areas that are going to be beneficial to you overall. So you may not want to socialize with your family or your friends, but perhaps, it's a good year to socialize at least once within 365 days to do so. And so for the introverts who don't want to be out there all the time, engaging in the forum, engaging in the groups through social media, so through the basement and Facebook, that is a form of social health, because you are engaging, you are communicating, you are forming relationships. I mean, we met online, we forged a relationship online that became offline, and now we've known each other for almost a decade. And so that's important for people to understand. And that's why too, when someone bulks at spending $10 or $20 to be part of a community, I kind of question and ask, well, if you're not the type to go out there and socialize at the bar or these parties, perhaps spending the money to be part of a community where you feel engaged and you feel mentally stimulated, emotionally involved, that's a good use of your money.
Who needs to hear your message the most right now?
I think right now, it's what's happening in this world are professionals, people who are striving still to achieve this milestone of salaries and titles, chasing that American dream of climbing up the corporate ladder. And with that said, the inverse would be the entrepreneurs as well that are hustling and grinding. I think ultimately, the people that I'm looking to reach are those who are striving to achieve what they believe will give them more happiness and joy. And what I'm saying is, I want you to set these goals, but we can do it slower, because we want to be able to ensure that we're taking care of ourselves in this path, because we're in here for hopefully a longer time.
Well, and it feels like too that just reminding us all that there's really a texture and a fabric to life that you don't get when you're only one of these dimensions instead of 8. I mean, that's what I really felt as I was walking through your work, that if I feed one part and I don't feed these others, then not only is it maybe destructive like it was for you, but you're also not just getting this fullness, this richness that we all deserve.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The thing is, with these multi-dimensional aspects of you, they are overlapping, they're interconnected, there's an intersectionality. So what happens is that when you are overcompensating in one dimension, it does have an effect on others, and that could be a negative effect as well. So for instance, if you're focusing solely on financial goals and you're saying, oh yeah, I'm financially healthy, sacrificing your social health to achieve those goals, well, eventually you'll realize that once you've achieved, let's say, financial independence, you're going, wow, I'm celebrating and I'm all alone. And it doesn't feel as good as I thought. And also the work dimension, because this is me. I stressed so much in achieving professional success that I was sacrificing other aspects of myself, such as my mental health, my emotional well-being, and that psychological distress then impacts our physical health. And so now there are physical manifestations of the psychological distress that we're facing due to the fact that we've just been focusing solely on our professional success, which is that work dimension, happy work. And then even in that dimension, I go and I argue that we really have to rethink our relationship with work. And I talk about rewiring, not retiring, not forcing ourselves to an arbitrary number, whether we're looking at retiring early or retiring traditional age. We need to start rewiring our brain and our mindset around work, because productivity is essential to our health, essential to our sense of self. And in addition to productivity, there's also teamwork. There's also the creative aspect. And so, yes, it's all connected.
It's so funny. There's so much to unpack, because I do believe when I see people go, I'm trying to do as little as possible at work. I'm like, why?
Yes.
Why? Either quit that job or get in there, man, because you're just wasting your time, which I don't know. I feel like your book is so much about what the true fabric is here, and sometimes we miss it. The book is called Happy Money, Happy Life, a multidimensional approach to health, wealth, and financial freedom. And I'm excited to say it's available everywhere, right, Jason?
Yes, it is. It's available everywhere.
Great seeing you, my friend. Hopefully you make it back to Texarkana on the tour, and let's do this again soon.
Yes, it's there. It's set.